Welcome to episode 529 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I am interviewing screenwriters Mike Capes and Johnny Wickham, who wrote an indie comedy action sci-fi script called The Invisible Raptor. They have a great story. They worked creating short-form digital content for a long while, and now are finally getting into the feature business. We talk how they wrote this film, what their intentions were, and then how they ultimately found producers and got this screenplay produced. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode 529. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing screenwriters Mike Capes and Johnny Wickham. Here is the interview. Welcome, Mike and Johnny, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Thank you very much for having us.
Hi, glad to be here.
Yeah, so to start out, maybe you can give us a quick overview of your background. Where did you guys grow up? How did you get into the entertainment industry? And Mike, why don't you go first, and then Johnny, you can go. And as I said, just 1 or 2 minutes, kind of the broad strokes of how you kind of got to the point now where you're writing this feature film.
Absolutely. So I can say I was born and raised in Los Angeles, just kind of on the outer skirts. And I've always wanted to be a filmmaker, always wanted to be a writer, ever since I saw the movie Goonies in the theaters when I was about 7 years old. And so I had grown up, I had started making films when I was a kid. As soon as I can grab a camera, I started making what I could. And I ended up getting into film school, making films in high school, then getting into college, going to film school. Funny story, I graduated with Steven Spielberg, which is kind of a fun little aside. He did his honorary degree when I was walking, so it was kind of cool. And so, yeah, so I've always been very into making films. Then after college, I sort of jumped into writing groups. And that's when I met Johnny. And him and I were both writing, producing digital content at the time. We were doing our own stuff. We were guys that were making our own stuff, but then also working for companies to do that. And we joined a group of guys who just wanted to get in and write some jokes and comedy sketches. And that had blossomed our relationship into writing together for the last 20 years. And we just continued working in the digital platforms a lot. And then also doing a lot of our own stuff.
Perfect. Yeah, Johnny, so maybe you can bring us up to speed on your background.
Yeah, so I am from Tennessee. I'm not an LA native. After college, I actually had an internship in LA during college where I worked for a commercial production company that then offered me a job, which is what prompted me to move out to LA, which kind of kickstarted everything. I really wanted to work in comedy, so I kicked as many doors as I could, finally found someone who would let me be a PA at HBO for the comedy festival. And that kind of spurred all kinds of jobs after that, because HBO started a digital division. I jumped over there immediately, and that's where I really got to start making digital content. And back in those days, which was like the early 2000s, no one was really paying too much attention to what was going on over there. So as like a young producer, a young writer, you were able to kind of start making stuff. Like the track was accelerated because all the professionals were working on movies and TV shows, and like no one was really paying attention to the digital stuff. So we really just got to run wild and do that. And then just it kind of snowballed from there. After that job at HBO, Jerry Zucker, the guy who wrote and directed Airplane and Naked Gun, started a digital company. I started producing writing with him, which is where Mike and I met. We met in a secret writers group in his office, where by day we were like making sketches for him. By night, we were using all of his equipment to do our own stuff. And a fun little aside story there is the stuff that we were doing on our own was getting more views than the stuff we were doing for the company. So it was really building confidence there. And then after that, I worked for a company called Break.com and then Nerdist. And we were, we're doing sketches and making internet content, gave us the confidence to say, we're doing this already. We can do this on our own. And it just took 20 years to write and get a screenplay off the ground, which, that's what they say. An overnight success is not made overnight.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So let's dig into The Invisible Raptor, starring yourself, Mike, and also Sean Astin. Maybe to start out, you guys can just give us a quick pitch or logline for this film. What is this film all about?
Okay, so The Invisible Raptor is a creature feature with absolutely no creature. And the reason why I pitched that to the guys was we can make a film and we don't have to spend any money on visual effects. So we were really looking at a way, it was kind of during COVID, and we were looking at a way to get together and make a project. And when that idea came into my head, I pitched it to Johnny and in our group, and Johnny and I got on the script. We wrote it in about a month, and we were just having a blast writing it. It was, again, we've been writing jokes for so long that we just make each other laugh. And really, we went into the script doing that. We're like, let's just write what we want to see. And let's just break, if there are rules, who cares? Like, let's just really have fun and write something great. And we had a blast writing it. And then when we showed it to everybody else, they were like, this is great. This is something special and unique.
We did not, when we wrote it, there was absolutely not even a glimmer that this would get made. Not even a sparkle of it being legitimately being made. We wrote it thinking like, all right, let's just have fun. Let's make ourselves laugh. Wouldn't it be cool? I distinctly remember when we were writing it saying, well, let's just go crazy, because who cares? It's not being made now. So we might as well throw everything at it. And it was like two people like dreaming of, what if the whole time we were writing it, because it wasn't happening. So there were moments where I distinctly remember us saying, oh man, wouldn't it be so great if this movie actually got made? Wow, wouldn't that be cool? That would be so cool. Could you imagine?
And if we had creative control to make sure we got the things made.
Right.
So.
And we were lucky enough to work with someone who eventually invested in our film that gave us absolute creative control. I mean, it was a blessing that
it rarely happens.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
So when this came across my desk, I get sort of the pitch. I get an email from your publicist, and it has maybe a log line, the trailer. And so seeing it, The Invisible Raptor, like as soon as I saw that was exactly the thought. Exactly what you just pitched was exactly what came to mind. Blake Snyder had this, it came to mind in the sense that, it's a great way. It's high concept, but you don't actually have to shoot the raptor. Blake Snyder has this thing in Save the Cat called double mumbo jumbo. And how do you overcome that? I mean, the idea with this is, Jurassic Park is one leap of faith, resurrecting dinosaurs, and the audience can do one leap of faith, but can they do two, resurrecting a raptor and turning it invisible? Is that something you handle? I mean, it sounds like you guys handle it in a lot of ways just with the comedy, but was that something you pushed up against? Was it something you thought about?
Yeah, we explain it. We explain it very classically in the movie, and I'll let Mike tell you the line. But in writing it, we talked about this, and we solved our own problem in a very unique way that is one of my favorite moments in the film. I'll let Mike tell you how we did it.
Which also became a runner in the film. So there was talk and rumors as Jurassic World and stuff was being made, that eventually these raptors are going to become really, they're going to be parachuting out of helicopters. There was all kinds of word online of where they're going to go and how far they're going to go. So Johnny and I talked about that as well. Well, let's take it. Let's A to C this, or let's A to Z this. Let's push it and take it to the furthest limit. But it comes down to describing the science of the film, and so we just kind of piggyback off of Jurassic Park because we didn't want to spend a lot of time describing it. So there is a wonderful one of my favorite lines in the film where my character confronts one of the scientists that was part of the creation of the Raptor, and he asks them, how did the Tyler Corporation, which is the evil corporation that made it, how did the Tyler Corporation make Raptors? And he, as straight face as possible, says, "Did you see Jurassic Park?" And I say, "Yeah." And he goes, "We did that." and
And then the next line is, well, how did you make them invisible?
He goes, "Did you see The Invisible Man?" So we that became a runner in the film of just, you know what, we don't, people know, like everything we know about dinosaurs, from how they sound to everything else, basically comes from Jurassic Park. So there's no need to overstep any of the information that's already been given to us.
And tonally, the movie's so silly from start to finish that like that explanation is all you need. You're like, oh yeah, of course, yeah, they just did that.
Got you. So, Mike, when you guys were writing this, did you know this was a role you might want to star in? It doesn't sound like you guys were that early on. It doesn't sound like you guys thought this would get into production very easily, but were you in the back of your mind thinking, I also want to act in this?
Yeah, so I think a lot of Johnny and I's background, when we were first writing with our comedy group, I was the guy in the writer's room that there was some news sketches way back in the day, and they were like, "Hey, Mike could put on a tie and he could do the news. He could be the news guy, like a Chevy Chase type thing." And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." So I started doing more on camera work. So over time, one of the bigger hits during our digital run at Break, because Johnny and I were both working there, we had a show that I hosted, and we were really crafting a voice. We did 50 some odd episodes of me playing this character. And then
Yeah.
that shifted over to another YouTube channel that became a big success, where I sort of evolved that character and brought him out into the world. This is sort of a play on that. It's kind of what we've been developing over time. So as we were writing the main character, we were writing for that comedic voice that we had crafted. He's kind of
Yeah.
a snarky, false confident guy, and there's some Chevy Chase in there. There's some elements of the stuff we grew up on, the Fletch type, sort of snarky, false confident guy. And so yeah, when we wrote the film, we wrote for that kind of character.
Yeah, there was never another actor in mind. We wrote it for that specific voice. And in fact, a lot of the actors in the film, we wrote specifically for, thinking, oh, like for instance, Sandy Martin. There was never another person that we had in mind writing for that character. We knew that we had access to Sandy. So we just wrote the character for Sandy Martin. And the same we did for Mike. So we got really lucky because she liked the script and she wanted to do it. And obviously Mike was going to do it because he wrote it. So it worked out in those two cases that two of the main actors in it we were writing for.
Right.
Gotcha. So let's dig into your writing process a little bit. I'd like to get a sense of sort of how teams work together. I've worked with other writers, and it's always a little different depending on the person you're working with. But what does your collaboration work look like? Did you guys come up with an outline? You're sitting in the same room? Are you using Zoom? Do you divide up scenes? Do you sit in the same room and crank out scenes? Maybe just describe, what does that sort of collaborative process look like for you guys?
Yeah, so one of my biggest things, I'm a big Blake Snyder guy. I absolutely love Save the Cat. I've read every book on screenwriting, and that one just resonated with me the most. And so I always tell Johnny, hey, if we're going to jump into something, I will go through the most detailed outline before I touch one page of screenplay. And so Johnny and I work, he embraced that, and we really dive into the outline. We work together all the time. I don't like separating it where I write something, then he does. We walk through every scene together. We do act outs. We write lines. One of our rules is best joke wins. Nobody gets offended. We always give to the other person, like, yep, that joke wins. That's the best. There's no ego in our writing. It's absolutely like, what's the best version of this?
I
And
love, yeah, I love that question too, because that's something that I always ask writers also because it's so fascinating. Just because I'm like, oh, how do you guys do it? Because it's so different for everybody. And I know a lot of people that just divide and conquer and then kind of smooth through. But this process was truly like from A to Z, like on Zoom, beating it out together, like and as Mike said, in a lot of cases we were acting it out, like
Oh yeah.
shooting lines back and forth, acting out scenes. So it was a lot of fun doing it that way. And like you said, we did it over COVID, so it was all Zoom. I don't think we ever got together and wrote in person once.
Yeah, I don't
My
remember. Yeah,
memory.
a lot of Zoom.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah,
And
and then we go through and really dive into all the questions of where a hole might be. If a scene, sometimes there's a great scene, and we're just like, oh, this is so good, but then it doesn't work because if you go back to another point, so and then what really helps with that process when we ask several questions about every sequence and how it affects the next and how it is affected from before. That really helps with plants so that you can do callbacks. Like, I feel like this script has a very good flow of planting seeds and having them grow throughout the film, and that really goes to our outline process, digging into everything before we get onto the page.
mhm. And so how long do you guys spend on the outlines versus how long are you in final draft actually cranking out script pages? Just what does that ratio look like? 50-50, 60-40?
80, 80,
I think it's
20,
80-20. Yeah, I
So
think
80,
once you have your out, so 80% on the outline and then
yeah.
20% on actually cranking out the
And in
script.
some cases,
yeah,
the outline was like full scenes. Like we
it
would be
had
like, okay,
dialogue.
we
Yeah,
would just like actually write the scene in the outline because we were like, oh, we know what we want.
Gotcha.
And then we went back and like we filled in. Funny enough, there were a lot of iterations of the script doing like kind of passes on like fixing grammar and typos. But in terms of like a whole new draft, we basically shot the first draft.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, outside of some improvised moments and stuff
Yeah.
on set that might have tweaked moments here and there, but and
Gotcha.
Because like I
casting.
said, the EP that inevitably bought the script did not have any notes. I mean, one little small note that we changed, but that was surprisingly it.
Hmm.
And something, oh, sorry, something kind of interesting too, when we were writing, my co-star, my co-lead, Denny Danielson, when we were writing him, we were actually writing for someone else in mind. And it was sort of more of a Danny McBride type of feel, and in some senses, but so casting had a lot to do with shaping that character, because when we ended up casting David Shackelford, he ended up bringing a different feel, more like
A
a
different tone.
childlike feel to it, and it fleshed out the character, to be honest with you, more. It might have felt a little bit more grating on camera if he didn't bring what he brought to it. So it was kind of interesting to see that too, where you might want to write for someone and be specific, and then an actor can come in and really bring a more of a fullness to it that you
Yeah,
didn't
he kind of
maybe see
180'd
before.
it and made it a lot better. I mean, that's
I think
where
so too. Yeah, it kind of grew up. It's funny. He brought a like wonder to the character, but it grew up and fleshed out the character, which we really appreciated.
Gotcha. So what does your development process look like? It sounds like you had a number of actors already in mind. So when you had a first draft, how do you know when it's time to start pushing it out and getting notes from those people? And what is maybe you can sort of just describe that development process in general. Number one, how do you know when it's time to start getting notes? And then what does it look like for you guys once you send it out?
Well, I would say that like the big thing is getting anybody to read it in the first place. I mean, you send
Yeah,
a script out and you're like,
Yeah.
I'll send it
yeah.
out to 10 people and nobody will get back to you. Mike likes to say the best way to get somebody to leave you alone is to send them your screenplay.
It's so true. It's so true. You just get completely ignored. Yeah, that we had table reads during COVID, because that was a time you could kind of get people on Zooms, and that was really helpful for us to bring some actors in the room, and sort of get notes. Do a lot of our own sort of question and answer during these table reads, and then this one. We had the table reads, but this one kind of, we got really lucky in a lot of senses, as any screenwriter knows. It was a very rare way that this happened. We wrote it after a month, and then uh, word about it got through friends, and then we got to someone who wanted to read it, and then the next week we
We didn't,
were making it.
but we didn't really change anything. I mean, we
No.
asked for feedback and people like the kind of unanimous feedback was like, oh yeah, we love it. And then it's like, okay,
Yeah.
is it really good then? Because no one's giving us critical feedback. Like it was
Yeah.
kind of there was about a month or three where we were like, I feel like people are afraid to give us notes because the feedback is like, oh, we love it, it's great. And we're like, well, hold on, give us some feedback that's
Well,
like helps us
yeah.
change it. So we ended up cutting a few jokes, I think, and that was about it. We cut a few scenes that we weren't going to be able to like actually produce, but
Yeah.
that was it. I mean, we didn't really get feedback that affected
Now,
the script.
when you guys were working with David Zucker, I mean, this is a legend of comedy. Some of these just
Jerry
plots.
Zucker, Jerry
Okay,
Zucker.
so yeah, okay. So these absolute classic films, though, like my understanding with a lot of those really broad comedies is there's a lot of like workshopping them, honing the jokes, getting feedback on the jokes, a bunch of joke writers in the room, and that sort of stuff. It doesn't sound like that was your experience with this. I mean, is my impression of how a lot of those spoof scripts were developed, is that wrong? Do you think, are there some lessons from that you took from working with him?
I think our big thing was if it made us laugh, it was in. It worked. It passed the litmus test there. And I think that's what they did too. It was, you know, in the height of those, it was Jerry Zucker, David Zucker, and Jim Abrams. And I think with them, if it made the three of them laugh, it was in. That was the audience.
Yeah.
You know, they
Yeah,
weren't.
that was in their book. Surely You Can't Be Serious. Yeah, they said if it made them laugh, they felt good about it. And I think that's where Johnny and I were coming from. It was like,
Mhm.
every time we made each other laugh, we would have these table reads and people would be just, laughing the whole time. And then we had when we started getting it out to people to get involved with the film, we were feeling really good about it too, because we got a special effects guy who's Steve Johnson, who's a legend in the practical effects industry, and we were really excited to have him. He sculpted Slimer for the original Ghostbusters, and we had got the script out to him through our producer Nick, and then all of a sudden he wanted to get on a Zoom with us, and when he did, he's just sitting there smoking his cigarette and with his cat walking around. He's just laughing to himself, and he goes, "Guys, I have read thousands of scripts." He's like, "I worked on Ghostbusters, for Christ's sake. This is the funniest mother effing script I've ever effing read in my effing life." He just went off. And we were kind of, and then he called me later and said, "I had a phone call with my friend in the industry of 40 years. I said, let me just read this screenplay to you, the first 15 pages over the phone." And he agreed to it. He says, "I read the first 15. We ended up reading the whole script over the phone to him." And he goes, and he was laughing the whole way through. So that was giving us a lot of confidence that what we felt was working. And then our biggest rule was, look, we love films like Ghostbusters. They're comedies, they're high concept, but the characters, the world plays it straight. It's not, you don't want to have a high concept and then put a hat on a hat and have a bunch of people trying to be funny in crazy town with crazy people. We had high concept, but we grounded it as real as it could be within the concept of an invisible dinosaur. But these people were reacting just like a human would if this was happening too. So that
Which
was a
is a
big rule
page
for
out
us.
of it's a page out of the Zucker book, you
Also,
know.
yeah, take it
Yeah.
seriously. Yeah, yeah. You don't have to play into the jokes. You don't have to lean into them. You just have the people play it like it's real, and let the high concept and the stuff, evolve and happen around them.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I
we
don't,
actually,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead, Johnny.
Well, I was going to say we got lucky enough to sit down with Jerry Zucker recently and basically fanboy out a little bit and be like, "We made a movie, can you believe it?" And it was just great getting to talk. We sent him the movie. I don't know if he's watched it yet. So
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's the only thing that gets you avoid more ascending than a screenplay is an actual movie.
yeah,
Yeah,
you'd think it would be
yeah.
easier for someone to watch a movie.
So
But
how did you guys, it sounds like, Mike, you were into Blake Snyder. How do you approach screenplay structure, especially something that's a broad comedy like this? Do you try and hit all of those beats, the midpoint, the inciting incident, the act breaks, all that sort of stuff?
1,000%. 1,000%. It's so funny. We had a friends and family screening, and one of the people in the audience came up to me and said, "Wow, a film about an invisible raptor had a dark night of the soul. This is wild." And like, he was blown away that it's funny that when you have a film called The Invisible Raptor, people come up to you later and go, "This was actually good. Like they always throw the
Yeah.
act like I'm your friend, but this was actually really good. This is a real movie.
We
And
got
it's
a lot
funny
of
to think that,
feedback. Yeah, we got a lot of feedback that made us realize that initially people were like, "Oh wow, this movie's gonna suck,"
yeah, I mean, it's,
and
you know,
then they were pleasantly surprised.
there's a stigma to a title like that because, and no offense to those movies, but you get in those the Sharknado kind of world where it's kind of a follow the plot script. It's not. It's they're trying to be maybe dumb, funny-ish, I guess. I don't. But we approached this way different. It was a high concept, premise, but structurally, I said, Johnny, we're gonna write this as a real film, like something Spielberg would have written in the '80s. Like we're gonna harken back to those films we grew up on. I believe that movies don't have souls very much for me anymore, and I feel like that's gone because people aren't writing character connections that would get you to a Dark Night of the Soul, that would get you sort of the beats and sort of subconscious things that happen to audiences when they're like, "Whoa, I'm actually connected to these characters. Why?" And so structure is very big for me. I'm a stickler on structure, as Johnny knows. I'm like, like I really love. I shared Blake Snyder with him. I go, you look, there are screenplay books that knock it down with like the first 15, your inciting incident. There's sort of the mapping of the structure. And Blake Snyder broke it down a little bit more relatable and he kind of gave it some fun titles and it really sinks in that way because like, oh, that makes sense. This is where the movie should turn. And this is where the characters should break apart, maybe. And this is where there should be tension. And this is, here's our thesis. Here's our antithesis, and here's our synthesis. I believe that the movie should have that ride, and I think people are experiencing that. Every festival we've gone to, man, people are really loving it, and giving us applause breaks. It's pretty wild to see that structure actually does work.
Mm-hmm. So once you were done, you had a script that you liked. What was this next step to raising the money? It sounds like you had this executive producer. How did you meet him? And I'm always curious just to get sort of the full scope. I think especially on a podcast like this, where you guys have a complete movie, we tend to forget all of the, the red herrings and the dead ends that we ran into. So were you sending this out to a lot of people and you found this one guy? Did you only send out this one guy and things? Maybe you can just sort of tell us sort of what you did once you had a script you like, and how did you go about actually getting this, raising money and getting executive producer and actually bringing this together?
Yeah. We had a dead end. We had an investor early on that we thought was committing some money, not enough to make the full movie. So we kind of just told ourselves, all right, well, let's make that version of the movie. It was significantly less than we ended up making it for. So we went down a path of like trying to figure that out with this investor. And ultimately he gave us a little bit of funds to do some like storyboards. And we were like, all right, are we going to make this movie? Are we not? We didn't hear from him for a while. We were pressing him. And then miraculously, almost as if heaven sent almost, Mike went to a wedding, and I will let him tell you how everything else transpired because it was the thing that made the movie.
Well, I'm going to trip back just a smidge on the previous investor. We had the meeting. It was one person who invested in things, had some money. We did one of those yacht meetings in LA, and at the time we had made some materials, and I think that's kind of fun to know. Like we had made a movie poster, and we put together the imagery, and we gave it this sort of Spielberg '80s feel. And so we
we did try to do a Kickstarter that was very unsuccessful.
I tried a Kickstarter, didn't work. I think
how much we raised, like
$250, I think. Yeah, $250 with a goal of 500,000. So that was embarrassing. I attempted the Kickstarter, thinking maybe my YouTube channel, because it had about 400,000 subscribers, and I was hoping maybe I could get them engaged, and didn't work. So that's one avenue that sometimes you're like, oh, if I got a lot of followers, I'm sure I can raise some money. That's not the case all the time. And then so I put together the poster. I put together a pitch video that had like a bit with the Raptor. It had interviews with the cast. We were doing that, and then I also made an action figure because I thought how I told the guys, I go, I want to make an Invisible Raptor action figure.
Oh, do you have that?
That
Show them the action figure
I
here.
do, yeah. And I said, I want to make an Invisible Raptor action figure, and it's just an empty package.
These are for sale on the invisibleraptor.com.
Yeah, on the back it shows you how to play. Here's my favorite joke. It just says collect them all. And so we had a blast. So I brought this toy with me, and I remember being in the pitch, and the guy, he kind of saw. He's like, "Wow, the toy's great. This is great." He was interested, and then it's one of those things where very common, I think, in Hollywood, where you're always kind of going, "Hey, he's not emailing.
Yeah,
Hey,
we
what's
just got
happening?
strung
Hey."
around. We got strung out for months, like
Yeah,
6
I don't know
longer.
if anybody does it on purpose, but it's just sometimes in LA, a lot of writers and people in this industry realize that there's a lot more talk than there is action. And friend of mine, a very good friend, had told me that he had a friend that was producing movies, had produced his first film, and he pitched a couple of scripts that I had written, a script that I had written before Raptor, and then he pitched Raptor. I didn't even know this. He just sent it to, and he didn't send him the scripts. He just told him about me. He was in the table reads during COVID for both scripts, and he really was just championing me to this a potential investor. So then catch back up to where Johnny said, I go to a wedding in Puerto Vallarta, and the investor friend was at the wedding. We went down to downtown. We're partying. I put him on a donkey, which you do in Puerto Vallarta. You can ride a donkey around a bar, which is fun. So I put him on a donkey, and we're having a blast. And as we're walking kind of down the street, he just stops and says, "Hey, what's up with that project, Invisible Raptor?" And I said, "I didn't know you knew about that. Did I pitch that?" And he goes, "No, I just, uh, our buddy told me about it." And he said, "What's going on with it?" I told him the investor story. He's sitting on his hands. We don't know what's happening. And then he just goes, "Well, how about I give you the money?" And I said, "I didn't know you had it." And he goes, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "Send the script and whatever you got that Monday." So I did. I sent the pitch video that I made. He immediately got back to me on the pitch video and said, "This is hilarious. I can't wait to read the script. I'll get back to you by the end of the week." And then by the end of the week, he called me. He set up a meeting with me. We sat down in a wine tasting place in Malibu, and he gave me a big hug and said, "Hey, I get tons of scripts sent to me. My girlfriend's mom sent me a script." He goes, "This is the funniest script I've ever read. I am all in." He gave me a big hug, and by that next week, the money was in the account ready to go. And
We were in production in like 2 weeks. So it was literally one of those like serendipitous,
just, yeah,
serendipitous stories where it's like you can plan and plot all day long and scheme and try to figure out how to make a movie. And it was just right place, right time, lightning
yeah,
in a bottle, lucky, 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 lucky.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes that's just what it takes. Can you speak a little bit to casting Sean Astin? I get a lot of emails from writers asking about specific actors. How could I get this actor attached or that actor attached? I'm curious, how much did that help in terms of raising money or distribution or getting other actors involved? And then just the logistics. Did you guys hire a casting director, had a relationship with them? Just walk through that a little bit for any writer that's potentially thinking about
He was
this.
the last person we cast.
Yeah, so we had already had the funding, and we were looking for a cameo. We were kind of talking to a lot of different people who were reaching out, and we hired a casting director, and we went through that process. We had some of our ideas. At one point, we got it to Paul Rubens, and he responded greatly to the material, but unfortunately, he was sick at the time, and but he did write back, which was very kind of him. And it's funny that we didn't think of Sean Astin immediately because he was the absolute perfect guy for what we were doing in so many ways.
We had
Because
a list. We had a list of like Steven Spielberg universe people.
yeah,
Obviously, Sean Astin was like very top of that list.
yeah,
And then after we got him and after we worked with him, we were like, I mean, of course, he's the only person
he
for
was
this.
the guy, and there's
He
a
was the
huge
guy.
nod.
He was the
Yeah,
guy the whole time, and he was lovely to have on set. He was so fun to work with. Brought his own ideas. He was a joy to work with.
Yeah, and so we told him about the nods we're doing because this film has a lot of nods to the Spielberg films, as to many other '80s films and '90s films. And he was so on board with doing a huge nod to Goonies, which is one of my favorite films, and the reason why I was doing this since a kid. He did a huge nod for us there, a couple of them actually. And then the best part is when we were kind of tossing jokes at him and different things on set. We had come back out of our little writer's corner and went up to Sean, and we were just about to say, "Hey, man, like, what if came back to life? I don't want to spoil anything, but what if you did?" And right as we're about to say this to him, he looks at us and goes, "Hey guys, I just had a great idea. What if I come back to life so I can be in the sequels and like come back?" And then we were just like,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah."
You were like, oh yeah, great idea. We would have never thought of that. That's a really good idea.
So yeah, it was through casting. He was the one. We knew most of the cast. We knew 98%, I'd say, as friends that we had
Wow.
thought of, or friends that we, either thought of for the role or had
Yeah.
cast over the process. But Sean, what we hired a casting director, they had got the material to him. He responded, which was awesome. So we were really excited, and then he jumped on board with us and was really cool. So that was huge for us.
Yeah, perfect. So I just like to wrap up the interviews by asking the guests if there's anything you guys have seen recently, HBO, Netflix, Hulu, that you can recommend to our mostly screenwriting audience. Anything out there that you guys think is really fantastic?
I will say the thing that I just watched that I'm still thinking about, and it's not anything that like even exists in the same genre that we're talking about, but My Old Ass is a movie that I just watched that I am still thinking about. I thought it was
It's
really
called
good.
My Old Ass.
My Old Ass.
Okay. And where is it? Where is it?
It's on Netflix, I
Okay.
think.
No, that's on Amazon Prime.
Oh, it's on Amazon Prime.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon Prime. My Old Ass. Aubrey Plaza is in it, but it's great. I went in without knowing what it was about at all.
Okay. Well,
And I was pleasantly surprised.
perfect. Yeah, I'll have to check that one out. Mike, you got any recommendations for us?
Not I don't have any deep cuts right now because I've been kind of out of the country, but I will say I just watched Alien Romulus, and I don't know if you've seen that yet, but gosh, it was incredible. It was like I had kind of not I didn't dislike any of the previous Aliens, but none of them like really grabbed me. And this one had this like really textured 80s feel and like throwback feel, and it just, man, it was tense. It was everything you kind of wanted. And they explored new, visuals that you'd never seen in alien films. Just really it was really cool to see writers who were really good at exploring things you've never seen in a franchise that's been kind of done several different ways. So I recommend Alien Romulus. It's on
Okay.
Hulu right now. It was really cool.
Okay, perfect. That's a great recommendation. How can people see The Invisible Raptor? What is the release schedule going to be like for that film?
So The Invisible Raptor will be in limited theaters and on digital December 6th.
Okay.
If you're in the LA area, it's playing at the Lemley Glendale, and we'll all be there.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll bring some
Pre-order
toys and stuff.
pre-order
Yeah.
on Apple TV Plus right now.
Yep. Pre-order is huge for us. If you can pre-order on Apple TV Plus, that's really big for small films.
Gotcha.
When you're one thing that we've learned about the sort of distribution side is that there's not a lot of money in the smaller distribution realm, and P&A is like a really big thing. That big studios and whatnot can put a lot of money into getting your movie out there. For us, it's more of a smaller grassroots type of thing. So if you get a lot of people to pre-order, it actually helps you get on the radar a lot more when it does launch. So we're learning these things, and we're just really trying to get people focused on that and
Gotcha.
check it out and buy it.
Also, if you
Yeah.
want an Invisible Raptor action figure, Raptor.com is the place to go for that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we'll round that up and put in the show notes. And that's sort of my last question. What are the what social media you use? Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anything you're comfortable sharing, I'll put in the show notes. And you can just tell us that if you have a page for the film, if you have a personal page that you use, we'll get that for the show notes.
Yeah, so on Instagram we're at Invisible Raptor Movie.
Okay.
And then I post a lot, so at Lord Mike Capes. What else we got, Johnny? The Invisible Raptor on Facebook.
Yes, the Invisible Raptor is on Facebook. I think it's probably just the Invisible Raptor, or maybe
Okay.
it's the Invisible Raptor movie. I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Mike, what about your YouTube channel? I think that would be interesting for people to check out some of your shorts and some of that other content you put up. How can people find that?
Yeah, and I'll tell you something funny about that. So it's called The Hacks of Life. It's on YouTube. And I'll tell you something, it's kind of a fun full circle thing as well. I had made I had snuck I was trying to do a thing where I get into Hollywood. I hack my way into Hollywood. So it's like really elaborate life hacks. So I snuck my way into the film Paranormal Activity: The Next of Kin, which was the most recent paranormal activity. And the way I did it was I actually got myself onto a TV in the background in a motel room, and we did a bit where they couldn't get me off the TV. So I'm actually in Paranormal Activity on a television set in the motel room in the background. And I had told my the Hacks of Life fans, I really want to be an actor. I'm going to sneak my way into a Hollywood film, and I did. But I said, next time you see me, I'm going to star in my own film. And that's when I was trying to raise money through the Indiegogo. That didn't work, but through the sheer will of the gods in the universe, I did get to make my own movie, and I did start it. So it's kind of fun to see that backstory and then me coming full circle to say I did it.
Yeah. And if anybody knows how to actually make Indiegogo work, let us know.
So the key with those things is having an audience before you start. That's really, it's not a sexy answer anybody wants to hear because it's a lot of work. But
Yeah.
and I've done Kickstarters for my own projects, and it's not a lot of money, but I have a small following here, and that's really what I lean on when I do the Kickstarter is the people that listen to this podcast. But you need that following. I mean, it's with everything really. You need you need to just build a following to some degree. I'm surprised though, Mike, the way you describe having 400,000 subscribers on YouTube, you weren't able to translate that into any real
We are
contributions.
too.
Yeah, we are too. Yeah.
That's not a good sign. That's not a good sign.
Our hypothesis was incorrect.
Well,
Yeah.
I will say I took a pretty lengthy break from the YouTube channel because I went through 3 different television development deals for the show to go from YouTube to TV and 3 different networks. So I had this long break where they didn't really want me making content because it would have been on the show. And then when I came back, the algorithm was not in my favor. So I went from, every video would get easily 1 million to 5 million views, and then it went down to 20,000, and it just really wasn't in my favor by the time I was really trying to launch this. So
Gotcha.
well, it's consistency.
Yeah. Congratulations getting this film done. I look forward to following your careers. Hopefully you guys will come back on the podcast when you have another film.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. We really
thank you
appreciate
guys.
it.
Yep. Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline and synopsis writing service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your screenplay gets a recommend or a consider from one of our readers, you get to list the screenplay in the SYS Select database, which is a database for producers to find screenplays and a big part of our SYS Select program. Producers are in the database searching for material on a daily basis, so it's another great way to get your material in front of them. As a further bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one of our readers, your screenplay will get included in our monthly Best of newsletter. Each month we send out a newsletter that highlights the best screenplays that have come through our script analysis service. This is a monthly newsletter that goes out to our list of over 400 producers who are actively looking for material. So again, this is another great way to get your material out there. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing screenwriter Jamie Greff, who was on the podcast in episode 306. Jamie has had some success writing and selling scripts for a number of different low-budget producers. Check out that episode. Again, it's episode 306 if you haven't already done so, as we talk about his beginnings in the industry, how he got some of these first credits and was able to kind of work his way up. But he's back next month to talk about some low-budget horror films that he's not only writing, but also directing and producing. And we really go into this whole model and how this all works. It's really fascinating. He writes and produces and does a bunch of other stuff too, creating these super low-budget films. And he's found a market for them where he's actually able to get them picked up for distribution. I love to highlight these sorts of niches in screenwriting. It's always incredible when someone has figured out a way how to do something creative and actually pull a profit from it. So I think it's a fascinating interview. Jamie's very transparent, really open about what he's doing with all of this. And we really go into some detail. And again, it's just a very interesting model, just being able to create something, do something that's just utterly creative. There's really no one pulling the strings. He has utter creative control, which for myself, as sort of an artist myself, I always look at that, and it has a great deal of appeal to me, even if it means working on a lower budget. Having that creative control, I just think is so important to this process. And Jamie really has figured out a nice little model here where he's able to create these very creative, almost avant-garde horror films, and as I said, find distribution for them. So very interesting model. That episode will publish on January 6th, early in the new year. So keep an eye out for it. That's the show. Thank you for listening.